That's right. Grade 11s. I'm going to do an example here just to show you what is happening. Okay. I'm going to draw a graph of g of x and f of x. Right. So let's say the straight line is our g of x and the parabola is our f of x. Now, what you must know is that any part of the graph that is below the origin or below 0 along the y-axis, we call that part of the graph to be negative. So I can say on the line g of x, you can see that any part below the origin or below the y-axis, that is the negative part of the graph, like that. Now, let's say you must also demarcate all the x-intercepts of the graphs. So in this case, we have got 3 x-intercepts. We've got the roots of the parabola, which is negative 6 and 0 and 8 and 0. And also, we have 2 and 0 for the straight line. Now, let's say you are given, they ask you to find out which values of x is g of x multiplied by f of x greater than 0. So you have to demarcate the zones. So I'm going to use vertical lines for the x-intercept. So I've got the point 6 and 0, I put a straight line. The point 2 and 0, I put a straight line. The point 8 and 0, I put a straight line. And then I have got here 4 zones, right? Let me start with the one on the far left. So on the one on the far left, I can say my g of x multiplied by f of x will be greater than 0. Why? Because in this zone, any point which I take for x value along g, it will be negative. And the corresponding f point will also be negative. So negative times negative gives me a positive. So this value, which is going to be a positive, will be greater than 0. So that will be excluding the point of intersection of the x-intercept, where it will be 0. Once f of x reaches 0, you multiply 0 with any value of g of x, it will be 0, which means we exclude that one. So I can see that in this zone to the left of x of 6, x is equals to 6, right? G of x multiplied by f of x will be a positive value, which is greater than 0. Moving on to the second zone, right, which is between negative 6 and positive 2. You will see that if I do my g of x multiplied by f of x in that zone, the value will be less than 0, meaning that in this zone, you can see that in this zone, g of x is negative. You multiply by any value corresponding f of x value, it will be positive. So you will see that negative times positive will give you a negative value. Do you see that? So in that zone, it does not satisfy the inequality which I'm given. So I will exclude this zone. So what I would say is that this zone is satisfying this inequality, and this zone is not satisfying the inequality. So this zone is not satisfying. Moving on, going to the third zone, the zone between 2 and 8. So you will see that g of x multiplied by f of x in this zone is going to be greater than 0, because it's g of x will be positive and f of x will be positive. Positive times positive gives you a positive, which is greater than 0. So that zone, this one, satisfies this inequality. Right. Moving on, the last zone, which is greater than from 8 going upwards, you see g of x multiplied by f of x is less than 0. Why? Because g of x is positive and f of x is negative. Right. So g of x is positive and f of x is negative. So positive times negative, you see that it gives you a negative value. So that negative value definitely is going to be less than 0. Right. Now, after doing that, you will see now that we have proven that the zones which satisfy, so basically that fourth zone does not. So we've got 2 zones. We've got this and this one, which satisfy that. So we can now write an inequality. We can say our x can be less than negative 6, and also any values between 2 and 8 satisfy that particular solution. Okay, right.